Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
Education.
Tishan Pillay and Anthony Govender, both from ASI Group, talking about the entrepreneurship through acquisition idea that we started talking about 2 weeks ago. And thank you so much for coming through. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure, Aubrey. Good evening to you. Good evening to the listeners.
And Tish, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure, Aubrey.
What do you think of what's going to happen tomorrow? Quick. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I'm very encouraged by Johan Rupert attending, with the delegation. Of course, they're ministers, but I think the fact that we have business minds in the room, President Trump and President Ramaphosa are both business people, and I think there's a deal to be made. And I think for as long as, there are calm heads, certainly our president has got a great temperament about him.
Yep.
And he's a diplomat. And I really believe between him and Johan Rupert, who, as you're aware, Aubrey, has a very close relationship with not only the Trump administration, but even previously the Bush administration. And so I firmly believe having Johan Rupert there in the room, along with our ministers who are, of course, advocating, a commercial reciprocity, if you will, between the two nations. I'm pretty confident that come tomorrow, we're going to have very good news. And, of course, we'll see the economic indicators show up very positively for us.
I think that the whole conversation has been built in many of our minds as South Africans, and maybe some Americans, as some sort of a thriller in Manila, kind of heavyweight boxing fight. But it looks to me that it's going to be a negotiation, a conversation between people who have certain interests, and maybe that's what it should be.
Well, we know that Elon Musk's Starlink is going to be a point of discussion. The reality is, South Africa is probably not as a significant trading partner to the US as the US is to South Africa. So we got to be mindful of that. And I think with having our president, with a very strong commercial understanding of what business entails, President Trump is a deal maker.
Yep.
And it's really about putting a good deal on the table. And I'm sure if there's alignment in the deal, I think, South Africans and Americans will be pleasantly encouraged by the news tomorrow.
Let's talk business. All right, let's talk deals. All right, we started 2 weeks ago on a conversation that I believe is a conversation that must be ongoing, and that is the principle of entrepreneurship through acquisition. Take us back, and what is this idea, and why am I so excited about it?
Well, let's recap. ETA stands for Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, and ASI had launched a search fund. It effectively goes live from the 1st of July. There's 300 million in capital allocation that's going into this fund. And search funds is not necessarily a new concept to the world. In fact, it was a study done in the early 80s by Stanford University. And, over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, it's been quite widely implemented in the US and Europe, not so much in South Africa. In fact, we are probably one of the first ones to get to market with this. We had a proof of concept a few years back, and thanks to Tishalin and the team, I've got some incredible actuaries and accountants that I work with. They've designed an incredible model that I believe will be a game changer for small business in South Africa. The search fund, in essence, Aubrey, really connects existing businesses that have traded for a number of years and targets entrepreneurs or business owners that lack a succession plan or keen to explore a succession plan, and doesn't necessarily have a solution for that. And the search fund would pair that business owner with a young entrepreneur, or potentially an entrepreneur within the ASI ecosystem, because ASI plays a dual role, either in the form of funder and investor, or in the role of search the searcher because we have existing entrepreneurs that are wanting to scale their businesses through acquisition. Our search fund, and there are typically 3 funds available in the market when it comes to search funds. I think what the traditional funds are typically, where you get a group of investors to put money into the fund. That's the first sort of traditional search fund concept. The second one is effectively a search fund that is self-funded, and that's where ASI plays currently. And we'll touch on the third aspect of funds, but I think more specifically for today's conversation, I want to focus on ASI's self-fund and the search fund, and what does it actually do for small business and entrepreneurs out there. And the idea really, Aubrey, is to connect the business community with one another and to create, as Tishalan put it in our previous podcast, a third way for South Africans. Typically youngsters getting into the job market, you were typically told, study law, become a lawyer, become a financial advisor, and then work at one of the big corporate companies, or you were asked, to go and start a business, and you needed to start a business from scratch. What the ETA Search Fund does is gives you a third opportunity, especially for those professionals that are tired of corporate life. You've got an MBA and you go, it's going to waste. I'm not going to, grow in the corporate ladder until my MD or CEO passes on, which is a terrible thought. But maybe some of my staff are thinking of me that way. But the idea would be, we'd want to connect those, those entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial minds into this model and have them connect with existing business owners. And simply put, what we are trying to do here is build brand South Africa when it comes to small business.
Yeah.
Bear in mind that small businesses employ almost 60% of South Africans in the country. So we're trying to solve a real problem in South Africa, very, very practical.
Yeah. And I think that's what excites me about the idea. Tish, we spoke a couple of weeks ago around the potential for wealth transfer during this moment where typically the baby boomers who started these businesses are wanting to exit for one reason or the other. But as Ant has just explained now, that the double whammy for young entrepreneurs is either they don't have enough education to be able to take on a business that is already operational, or they don't have the money. And so we have a situation where there's no opportunity. This is the third way. I'm excited about that. Talk to us a little bit about this.
Definitely, you're spot on there, Aubrey. The idea itself, the model of ETA and search funding, actually stems from the great wealth transfer, which is what we're about to experience if we're not already experiencing that. What that means is we've got
it's generational wealth transfer, right?
Yes, generational wealth transfer. So you've got the Generation X and the baby boomers who have dominated the economy, whether we're talking about the workforce or in terms of business ownership. These people are aging and they're about to retire and some sadly passing on. And the question begs, what happens to these businesses? There's going to be a huge succession gap as this wealth and the assets and the businesses have to be transferred to the millennials and Gen X. And the model of ETA and search funding really stems from that place. Where do all these businesses go? So that's really what's driven it overseas in markets like the US and the UK. But when we look at Africa and South Africa, there's the other factor of youth unemployment, which is a big problem on the continent.
Yeah.
So ETA and search funding is proving to be quite a compelling solution to the succession gap and to the youth unemployment crisis, because essentially it pairs a young entrepreneur that's looking for an opportunity to enter the economy with a retiring founder who's looking to exit the economy.
Give me a sense of how big this monetary transfer is in the South African context?
Well, it's about a 4.3 trillion rand problem. That's the amount that we're looking at in terms of, transfer of businesses, at least, that need to change hands in the next few years. So essentially, we've got this third way for a young entrepreneur or business person out there. Typically, that would be somebody who's spent 5 to 10 years already in the workforce, that's quite highly qualified, and has all this knowledge and expertise that, from their perspective is being wasted in the workforce. Then you've got young entrepreneurs who've already started a business but are having trouble scaling that business. Or you've got, the third case where you've got an entrepreneur who's already started and scaled a business and is looking to do more. So the ETA Search Fund model is the third way for a young person to enter the economy. You don't have to just simply get a job or start a business from scratch. You now have a chance to acquire a business from a retiring founder and have the benefit of funding from a private equity investor like ASI, for example, who also incidentally can provide advisory services and mentorship support. And you're basically bringing these three parties together into a win-win-win model.
I want to speak to my listeners right now and say, you remember that our big issue in various conversations that we've had about entrepreneurship in South Africa is, how do we get finance for our businesses? How do we get finance for our businesses? And we've had conversations about various financiers, government financiers, capital investors of different types. But the part that we haven't really talked about is the fact that there needs to be a hand-holding process by those who lend you the money, so that they have a sense of security in the relationship. And it appears that in this particular instance, and we've answered that question. We've answered the question of, yes, here's the money, it's available, but it's not a matter of you just being given this money so that you can go buy the next X5.
Yeah.
It's really to invest into the business so that the business is able to grow so that you can buy yourself 100 X5s later on, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that process. Please give me a call, 011-883-0702. What are your thoughts about this idea? Is this the kind of thing that you would like to be involved in, both from the entrepreneur's side of the equation and the owner's side of the equation? Maybe you haven't really thought deeply enough about the succession of your business. Maybe this is a third way. Yeah. I like the third way thing. I really. You should write a book called The Third Way. Talk to me about that, and.
Aubrey, I think what's really unique about the ASI Search Fund is we define it as the trifecta for, if you're a gambling man and if you follow the horses, the trifecta gives you three big wins,
Right.
And so I think that the trifecta win for the business owner as well as the young entrepreneur, the searcher, is that you get, firstly, the investor in ASI because you have access to capital. One of the primary reasons that ideas or businesses don't succeed in our country is access to capital.
Yeah.
This, and I would also argue access to certain markets that have high barriers to entry, the financial services, the property industry, amongst others. So you get ASI as the investor. Secondly, you get ASI as the advisor and the mentor and coach. Because we've done this in so many businesses already and we understand small businesses, having been one once upon a time 16 years ago, we've gone through all the growth pains that entrepreneurs would ordinarily go through. So they've got a great teacher and mentor and coach. As a third part, you have a business operator. And when you have an operator, someone sitting alongside you in the business, who's invested in the business with you as an equity partner, they are emotionally and financially invested in your success and ensuring that you win. And so what the traditional financing models don't embody is this holistic approach. You referred to the botanist in our previous conversation, and it's really about us.
Yeah, the grafting in of another plant.
It's exactly what we're doing. Is we would graft this young entrepreneur into this business, giving them the skills, capacitating them for leadership, guiding them on systems, processes, scalability. Those 7 pillars of business management and entrepreneurship that we teach so passionately within our business. And that's really what we want to do in this particular process. And what we found is there are a lot of funds. There's the National Empowerment Fund. Minister Parks Tower mentioned the 100 billion. Sorry, I mentioned $1 billion in my last year. It's 100 billion. That's available. But it's a concept at this point. There's still got to be a lot of, public consultation, policy debate amongst others. This fund is readily available. The money is readily available.
Let me ask you specifically about that. The money is available. One of the complaints that emerge in conversations about funding businesses, particularly when it's money that comes from the fiscus, from government. I forget what the name is that is used for the collective sort of industry that lends money to entrepreneurs. I think it's a developmental fund something. Anyway, but these guys have money that comes from the fiscus. It's taxpayer money, right? One would argue that they don't have the kind of relationship with that money that is about getting a return on that investment. It's money that, that has all sorts of slogans attached to it. Like, it's money that's required by a developmental economy. And so we're not necessarily looking for a surplus or a profit, which I think is a fundamental flaw in the financing of anything, right? There's got to be a rabid need for a return on investment. One of the big issues that has come out in conversations that I've had on this very platform about financing is that money is therefore lent to people that are not properly invested in it, by people who are not properly invested in it. And therefore you have a reality where money is simply being given away, doled out, without a real strategic intent behind the money. Yes, it can be written down somewhere that this is what we want to do, but there's no vested interest by those. Where is your fund coming from? Where is this 300 million rand coming from? Are you getting it from some government department? Where is it coming from?
That's a great question.
Do you understand though? I mean, I don't mean to pry.
No.
I think for me, it's very, very important.
Part of our values is transparency. So
yeah. So for me, it's very, very important to understand whether you guys as ASI have real skin in the game. Because yes, the entrepreneur who's looking for the opportunity is going to have skin in the game because he owes you money.
Quite right.
The guy who's leaving, who's exiting, has got skin in the game because he's going to get a check, but he's not going to get all of it. So he's got skin in the game. To what extent have you guys as ASI got skin in the game, and where's the fund coming from?
It's a great question, Aubrey. So you'd recall I mentioned that there are 3 sort of funding models, and the traditional sort of search fund model, and then there's journey fund models. We fall in the second category, which is a self-funded search fund. So the 300 million belongs to ASI shareholders.
Okay, so it's your money.
It's our own money.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's my money, but it belongs to ASI, and it's ASI money.
Yeah.
And so we have a board that holds us accountable in terms of how that money is spent. We've got to be incredibly disciplined and responsible in terms of the funding of these transactions. But secondly, and more importantly, you very astutely pointed out that when a government agency, the administrator, signs the check, it's not their money. There's no emotional investment.
Absolutely, they feel that.
There's no financial investment. If the money gets lost, it doesn't hit their bank account. In this particular scenario, If we lost 100 million rand, trust me, I don't think I'd be the CEO anymore. Right? I've got a pretty, a demanding and responsible and accountable board where they would want to know that we have made good investment decisions. We've had a 93% success rate on this already. So we know what works. We know what doesn't work. And so the emotional investment and the financial investment from us is hugely motivated by the fact that it is our money. We're not borrowing it from a bank. And we firmly, and it's been a philosophy of ASI that we'd prefer using our own money because it's cheaper than the bank's money.
And does it make it cheaper for the entrepreneur?
It also makes it a lot more affordable for the entrepreneur because the cost of capital and the cost of repaying that capital is a lot more affordable to the entrepreneur. And that's the major challenge. Yes, there are financing vehicles, but if you typically go to one of the major banks and if you end up paying prime plus 2 or prime plus 5, it erodes a lot of the margin for the entrepreneur who's only just come into a business, and so the capital and the sustainability period is prolonged. Where you're looking to recover in a period of 4 to 5 years, that's now pushed out, to 7 to 9 years. And so what we've been able to carefully craft in the model is a solution that allows the entrepreneur to recover very quickly. And to Charlone's point of it being the third way, he also gets to earn some social security because he earns a paycheck out of the business whilst he's managing the business. And this carefully crafted solution allows the business to be more sustainable. There's a 400% greater chance of an entrepreneur succeeding in our model than they would in a startup business.
I'd be interested to find out, Tish, as to, with your experience as a company with regards to the model, which I suppose is being refined as we go along, where were the seeds of ETA for ASI?
I think the real seed was looking for growth.
Yeah.
And looking for growth in a saturated market where opportunities are few. It's a principle that's quite universal that when you're looking for growth in a place that opportunities are limited, you have to become innovative. And I think the inspiration for it was really born from looking for innovative ways to achieve growth in a market like South Africa on the African continent. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there and entrepreneurs out there and young business people that are in the same position that we were at the time when this idea came about. And, now that we've done it and we've proved the concept, and as Anthony's mentioned, we've got a 93% success rate. Another statistic that he mentioned was the ETA Search Fund model has a 400% success rate or probability of success compared to normal entrepreneurship where you start from scratch.
Yeah.
So I think we've proved that those numbers are real, and now we'd like to share that with the rest of the continent, especially starting here at home in South Africa.
So if I can add to that, Aubrey, the search fund model really was brought about, as Tishalin points out, the need for growth. But the typical challenge when you want to grow a business, you have 3 major challenges: cash flow or capital, skills, and time. If you're in the services industry, to train skills takes you a lot of time. To build capital and cash flow takes you time. And so in order for you to accelerate the growth model, we had to find a formula that allowed us to work within trusted partnerships. And so the entire model and ecosystem of businesses is based on a trusted entrepreneurial partnership model. And the idea is to ensure that the entrepreneurial partner succeed, with the IP, the skills, and very importantly, the capital injection and cash flow injection that we put into those businesses. So I really think that the transition we've made from being a small business into now being a large generic company, if we took the same IP and thinking into a number of other smaller businesses, we could create many other ASIs. And that's ultimately the goal here. To build Brand South Africa, we've got to build more local businesses.
Yeah.
The problem we are trying to solve is not just building local businesses. The problem we are trying to solve is creating more employment. We're trying to, alleviate poverty through building better social security for our people. We're trying to build financial literacy and business literacy. And these are all very inherent problems in our society. The fact that we have found a formula that works and is incredibly sustainable, it would be irresponsible of us as a corporate brand not to share that knowledge and intellectual property with as many businesses as we can. And that's the whole point of being here, I suppose.
Give us a call, 011-883-0702. I see the calls are coming in. I'm not really sure why we are unable to pick them up, but please keep calling on 011-883-0702. I'd love to hear your thoughts about ETA and search funding, and what your feelings are about it. Is this something that's viable? Is this something that is, and one of the things that I have sort of been quietly, maybe not so quietly, but that I've sort of lamented is the fact that often in the financing of young entrepreneurs, decisions are made by people who are not entrepreneurs. Very often the decisions to fund somebody are made on the basis of other considerations other than whether or not there's going to be a return on investment on that business, on the business. So in other words, the thinking behind the financing of ideas is often not entrepreneurial. It might be something else. The something else is not necessarily invalid. It's just not entrepreneurial for an entrepreneurial venture, right? And for me, I find that we lose a lot of opportunities because the way we make decisions about who we fund, particularly for the government-funded developmental funders, right, is that often the way that people are able to get that funding is that they've got to put elaborate business plans together without getting somebody to understand what the idea's fundamental value is at an entrepreneurial level. Talk to me about how you guys bridge that gap, because I suppose I'm looking for the criteria for who is able to access this fund. And very often I've seen and heard how people are just dismayed and discouraged by the processes for getting funding, that don't understand that we're dealing with entrepreneurs here, not administrative gurus.
Or not political administrators.
You said it.
A great question, Aubrey. I think, let me start off by saying, and I think Tishalan would agree with me on this one, that we're not looking for distressed businesses. In order for us to ensure success of the search entrepreneur, we want to buy or invest into businesses that are sustainable, that have got longevity and legs to them. And so we're not looking for distressed businesses. And I think a number of you listeners reached out. So, to everyone listening, thank you for reaching out. But one of the elements of our investment decisions is going to surround the sectors that you operate in. So the three sectors that we are targeting for investment now, and it may expand down the line, but this is where we are focused on now, is financial services, typically intermediary-based services. These are brokerages that advise in the area of insurance or wealth management, investment management, employee benefits brokerages, and they're typically the middlemen, if you were between an insurance company and the customer. These businesses are great from a revenue point of view. It requires low capital investment. It delivers really good cash flows, they're strong cash generation businesses, and they are scalable with the right kind of systems, processes, and brand infrastructure. So financial services being the one, we'd be very open to look at businesses that have bespoke product offerings, but we are very mindful that we don't necessarily want to compete with some of our insurance partners in the industry. The second composite of businesses that we would be looking at is in the property management space, either providing fiduciary or legal services to industrial, commercial, sectional title communities, and property management businesses that have at least been in the market for a minimum of 5 years.
Okay. So there's got to be some pedigree.
Yes, if we don't want to invest in ideas, we are wanting to invest in well-run businesses. And one of your listeners had contacted me about a week and a half ago, and I really felt for her. I personally called back, and fortunately, she has a pottery business and arts and crafts business. And I was able to connect her with 2 other people that maybe it was just coincidence and luck, sheer luck. I don't think I'm going to be that lucky every week. So the business owners that I want calling us are those guys that I invested in financial services, property management. And then there's a third composite, ICT, what we would define as connectivity. These are traditional IT businesses, doing managed services, telecoms business. Incidentally, we are actively looking for businesses that are telecoms carrier businesses. We've got a fantastic partner in Converge Telecoms that's actively looking at growing their business through acquisition. So there we already have a searcher. There's an allocation of capital from the fund. We're now just looking for business owners that are looking for long-term succession. And Peter and Brian, who are the 2 partners in that business, are absolutely exceptional in what they do. And so those are the 3 sort of core composite businesses: financial services, property, ICT. Businesses in the ICT space need to be 50 million rand or more in revenue. And we typically look at the SGAs. SGAs are referred to, or expanded definition is the sales, generative, and administration costs of generating the revenue. So, because in the ICT space, if you delivered 100 million rand in revenue, there's a certain cost of material and a cost of sale, if you will. And so if the gross margins are 60%, it would be tolerable if you were delivering a certain EBITDA. So 50 million or more in the ICT space. In the property management and financial services space, advisable 35 million going up, but we will consider from 20 million going up. One of the second key indicators we look at, I mentioned the minimum of 5 years of trading, but we will consider businesses from 3 years, especially if you've done incredibly well in growing your company, and you're wanting to expand through acquisition. We could take you on as a searcher. The other key element for us to look at, Aubrey, is the kind of skills that's in that business. We don't typically want to invest in a business where the business is just the owner and there's nobody else around him, because there has to be an element of skills transfer.
And systemization.
And some systemization, and there has to be a team supporting that particular company, especially if you're in the services space. And we're looking at businesses that produce an EBITDA, my apologies, not an EBITDA because that can be manipulated, a net profit after tax of 5 million or more. Why is this important? This gives the searcher the ability to pay the loan back over a period of time and still have some money left over for himself. There has to be a win for the business owner that's getting the big capital paycheck, who's now selling his business to the young entrepreneur. There has to be a win for the young entrepreneur, and there has to be a win for the search fund, being ASI, where we are able to recover our capital. And I must say we've been incredibly successful in over 15 transactions done over the last few years. We've been incredibly successful in recovering our capital. We've picked really great partners. And maybe just the last point I want to close off on, and this is the most critical. Forget the numbers. The embodiment of a business is the business owner. So if you're not the right DNA and culture, if you don't have the right ethical standards, if you're not an integrous business person, we won't choose you.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to take some calls.
Please, go ahead.
Hebron is in Johannesburg. Hi, Hebron.
Hello, good evening, Aubrey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Look, my question is pretty much simple. It's really an interesting conversation that you're having regarding, entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Yeah.
But in South Africa, for an example, it's not a majority of entrepreneurs that really understand the meaning of that particular term. And I love the fact that in your opening you started by giving a clear definition of what ETA is and how entrepreneurs can absolutely take advantage of ETA depending on how long they've been running their businesses for.
Yeah.
And the varied reasons thereof of having to have somebody to take over their businesses for whatever amount of money they intend to sell that business for. Because, there are key aspects there with ETA that you obviously need to take into consideration. And I was hoping that your guest would actually, touch based on, those key aspects, which is acquiring existing businesses, for example, and leveraging the existing assets within the business. And also, regarding the growth and scalability of that business and, the risk that has to be reduced thereof in that particular business that is looking to have, their business handed over to an interested party of that particular business in a specific sector. But I've got my own question based on what I've just said to you, to your guests there. What exactly are the advantages for an entrepreneur to have their businesses, sold, irrespective of whether the business has been in existence for about 3 years or not? Because there are businesses that could have been in existence for 10 years, but you obviously also discover that there's absolutely not being sufficient revenue or profits that are being made in that particular business. And obviously, then therefore, that entrepreneur is already disadvantaged. They cannot even take a step to take advantage of an opportunity of this nature. And secondly, you find out there's a business that has been in existence for about a year, and that business has done tremendously well from a financial point of view. So then you're gonna have to look into those two things and be able to communicate to the entrepreneur
let's get
what then therefore works best for you.
Let's get that answer, Hebron. I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anthony's here. Let's get him to answer. Thanks very much, Hebron.
Thank you for the question, Hebron, and two very astute points there. Firstly, let me touch on the risk management aspect. So every business that we invest in, we will qualify the risk of the business. We work with the search entrepreneur in going through a very extensive due diligence, assessing the financial risk, the operational risk, and there are 7 key pillars that we look at, from strategy mapping to the technological infrastructure, systems, processes, the culture of the business, employees, their customers, etc. Without going through the detail of that expansive list, Aubrey, I think it's maybe a follow-up conversation in terms of the risk management, but there's an extensive process. The drivers behind entrepreneurs selling their business. Let's unpack why we get into entrepreneurship to begin with. I love making money, not because of money itself. I see the impact that it can have into community, into our business, the many families we employ.
Right.
And I don't think it's any different. I think on the last show, I mentioned that in order for you to succeed in business in South Africa, you have to love South Africa. So there are 2 golden threads that we pick up in the entrepreneurs that we talk to. One, they are very focused on wealth creation and building social security for them and their families. And as a second part, they love the hunt and they love building brand South Africa. Why would they want to sell? Any entrepreneur would ultimately want to realize a return from the many years of his hard work and investment into the business. The average business that sells today is typically a 55-year-old male who's a baby boomer and is now wanting to find a succession plan. And if that succession plan doesn't exist, he would naturally come to us to help him with that. The defined wins for him is getting some capital off the table, right? I've spent 15 years building the company, and that is worth something. Of course, it's about valuing the asset, Sometimes it's not just the legal entity that is being sold. Sometimes it's the book of customers or the assets attached to that business, but there's a value and he will get capital off the table. The second driver for him is that most entrepreneurs that we engage with are emotionally invested and attached to the brand or companies they've built. In order for you to be an entrepreneur, you really got to care about the thing that you're building. And it's, they almost see these businesses as their own children, if you will. And so this very paternalistic feeling that they have of the company is something that we pick up in all of our conversations, that they care about the employees, they care about the customers, they care about what happens to the business next. And on that basis, they want to make sure that the business survives long after they have gone. And the defined wins, if I could give you two big ones, would be the entrepreneur realizing value in capital off the table for the asset that they've built. And secondly, ensuring that the business continues after they exit because they've put so much into it. And a lot of them are actually pretty insistent in finding a partner where they can have a personal relationship with, rather than simply going to a listed fund. They would rather have a relationship with the search fund owner and go, I'd like you to build this to make it bigger. And even if I didn't get to realize the dream, let's take it to the level and where we need to.
And I need to stop you because we've run out of time. But as I said, this is a marathon conversation.
Yeah.
I want to thank you very much, both of you, for coming through. How do people get in touch with you? I see you've already had people get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So they can get onto our website, which is asi.co.za. As a starting point, there's an inquiries page. You can fill out your information on the inquiries page. You can contact our offices on Johannesburg 011 029 6123. And if you're looking for a dedicated contact, Tishalin Pillay, spelled T-I-S-H, S for sugar, H for Harry, A-L-A-N, L-I-N. Did I get that right?
A-N.
A-N. Okay.
Tishalin.pillay@asi.co.za.
Gentlemen,
Perfect.
I've
There we
got to
go.
stop you there. Thank you so much to Charlene Pillay, Anthony Govender, both of the ASI Group.